this issue of out-of-school children is one of the most important and a major source of insecurity in this country. 20 million children that are out of school is a time bomb for any country. Already we are experiencing banditry. And of course, I also want to thank Senator Ndubueze. Senator, if you want to talk about appropriation, take him outside. I just have to mention your names one by one now so that you know that here you have the decorum in the Senate. There is decorum in the Senate. I'm not impressed that people are not listening to one another. So why will he speak and others listen to him? When it is his turn, he is engaging you in appropriation discussion. Please, let's be serious here. This is a very important topic. I allowed 1 hour, 30 minutes, because if we can solve the problem of out-of-school children in Nigeria, over 20 million children that are out of school, those are potential bandits. Major danger. You can send your children to Cambridge, send your children to Harvard. They can't come back home. You can stay here as a senator, and your house is occupied by bandits at home. I have colleagues who are now ministers who have not been to some places in Borno for 5 years. They build houses, abandon those houses. It started from this out-of-school children issue. So that's why I allowed us to discuss it. It's a very major issue. So let us look at the recommendations and see where it falls short. We add, we amend, or we bring up an addition that can at least help us to make our input towards resolving these issues. Senator Goje, Senator Bello, Senator Lalong, and distinguished Senator Dixon, and a few others here with me, we've had the privileges of being governors in our various states. And we know that primary school education, basic education, belongs to even local government, assisted by the states. The salaries of primary school teachers are paid by local governments. That is why we applaud the Supreme Court decision that monies meant for local governments should go direct to local governments. It should not be withheld, deducted, and used for other sources. So it's our job now as legislators to give verve to the Supreme Court decision. And like the Attorney General of the Federation said, I was in Calabar the other day when somebody stood up to give a lecture castigating the Supreme Court and all that, and I refuse to make comment because if you are not satisfied with the Supreme Court decision, you go to God. The Supreme Court has spoken, and it is our business to obey the Supreme Court. In the legislature, it's our business to tinker and work around the laws to make sure that that decision of the Supreme Court is not in vain. So these out-of-school children, if we have to make a legislation on it national, we must do so. So please, let's be very, very serious about this. You have children. They can't come back from abroad after all the investment and they die without knowing why. Because a group of bandits will lay them on the road, rape them, kill them, and then you don't know why they are dying. They are dying because you failed to do the basic. You failed to send your neighbor's child to school. When I was a governor, I declared free and compulsory education for all Nigerian children who found their ways into Akpabio. Paid their WAEC fees, their NAPTIC fees, everything. Compulsory. And I had education monitors. From 8 in the morning, they go around. If they see a child that is hawking, they'll pick up the child, go and arrest the parents. And there were consequences, 6 months imprisonment for any parent or guardian. They allowed a child of school age not to be in school. So if we can replicate that nationally, I think we can solve the problem. We had to build over 6,000 new classroom blocks because of the influx of students. My state was regarded we had this house boy, house girl syndrome. When I declared free and compulsory education, you could not see any Akwa person selling groundnut in Lagos. So this is a very serious issue. You go to Kano and you see the number of children who are outside. If the state governments can take action backed by federal government, then something will be done. If we are not able to access UBEC forms, UBEC forms, then we should remove the idea of counterpart funding and then send those monies to, what is the point of keeping billions and billions and billions for over 10 years on the ground that states could not access? We must take this issue very seriously. This is the core of the insecurity in this country.
West Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me also join my colleague in commending the committee for a job well done, but with some reservation. Mr. President, before I go into just the document that is before us, I strongly believe that there are some salient issues which we should ask ourselves. And I know for a known fact that the government, successive administration has done a lot in the educational sector. Even from the content of the reports, where you observe from the activities before the observation and the recommendation, it shows the committee in this document also show the effort of the government that has been done regarding the out-of-school children. But we are not looking at one important area, which all of us should ask questions about, which is at the subnational level. There are a lot of effort. For instance, the universal basic education, which you've just mentioned. Mr. President, the rule about the universal basic education is that the government will provide certain part of the fund, while the state government will complement. But we have billions of naira lying fallow at the universal basic education, with the state unable to come up with their own counterpart funding to address all these menace we have under the out-of-school children. They cannot come up with the fund. And the federal government every year, because universal basic education in the budgetary allocation is on a first-line charge. It's a first-line charge item. So the federal government is providing their fund, but the subnationals are not coming up with their own counterpart funding, which is a problem. So, Mr. President, I want to say that the government is doing a lot of effort. It's been, as contained in this report, the identification and the exercise carried out alone identify about 24,000 out-of-school children between 2021 and 2023. About 1 million enrollment has been done regarding the out-of-school children, as contained in this report. As contained in this report. While the report also raises the challenges that is confronting, but in their recommendation, some of the challenges that were raised, they were silent on it. And this is one area I want us to look at. I will give you, for instance, Mr. President, if you look at page he said, on page 4, he said the major factors responsible for the spate of the out-of-school children. He said, number 1, educational demand barriers, issues around poverty and lack of resources to enroll children in school and socio-cultural norms, tradition, and beliefs. 2, he said educational supply barriers, non-availability of sufficient classroom, deficit of qualified teachers, particularly in rural areas, teachers, guides, and learning materials from the government. As we go to their recommendation, they were silent on some of these important items they have identified as the major barriers. So, Mr. President, I want to agree that yes, this is a menace in our hand which we need to tackle. But at the same time, we need to do more at the subnational level, because this is where it all started. As we speak, payment of the salaries of primary school teachers, even their areas, are domiciled with the local government authorities. It's with them. So I think the subnational should do more in this regard. We should not put all problems, everything, at the doorstep of the federal government. Federal government is to come up with a national policy that will cover every area regarding these out-of-school children, but we should call on the subnationals as well to do more to assist in this regard. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Let me add.
I represent Bayelsa West. Firstly, I want to commend the very thorough work done by our committee that has been presented to us, and also commend the efforts of distinguished Senator Adebule, who raised this as a very urgent matter, and indeed a very serious issue of national concern. Mr. President, general comments and then few remarks on the recommendations. The crisis facing our educational system is at the core of insecurity, is at the core of leadership failure, is at the core of a lot of issues affecting the development of this country. And one of the most important contributions this Senate can make in our national development efforts is to ensure that we get to the root of this. Not just addressing the issue of out-of-school children, which is very important, but also the crisis facing the educational system generally. All of us who went to schools 30, 40, 50 years ago know the kind of education that was available. Available for the rich as well as the poor. There was a time when students from all over Africa and even beyond took pride in coming to this country to attend our universities, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So, Mr. President, as we discuss this issue, let's not limit our contributions only to the issue of out-of-school children. Very important, but we should use this opportunity, in my view, to undertake a comprehensive overview of the crisis facing our educational system. And bearing in mind the fact that, rightly so, in our federal system, the issue of education is on the concurrent list. Yes, it's on the concurrent list. So there's not much really by way of legislative intervention that we can do. Yes, we have a role to play, and which is why in the area of recommendation, Mr. President, I think we should not get tired. We should rise to the occasion and have a conversation with the leader of the executive arm. I suggest that the time has come, if it's not even too late, but it's never too late to try. We should move for a national conference, kind of. Maybe not a conference, but a summit. We need a summit where you have the stakeholders at the sub-national levels. And it will be nice, Mr. President, if this Senate and the National Assembly under your leadership will take the lead in this. Because this issue is at the core of insecurity. For those of us who have had an opportunity to serve at other levels, we know the differences we made by investments in education, by building schools as we did, by introducing even boarding schools for the first time for some of us as I did, by introducing the Tertiary Education Loans Board, which happily, Mr. President, has replicated at the federal level. That's why I enthusiastically supported it. By introducing the Education Development Trust Fund in my state, where a compulsory levy was put, and the various schools, primary, secondary, and making even feeding, even clothing, free in those schools.
30 seconds left.
So this is, with what we have, we know what investing in education can do beyond putting people in schools, beyond building manpower, beyond creating future qualified, competent leaders. We are also addressing security problems. So my suggestion, lastly, before I take my seat, Mr. President, is that you should lead, have a conversation with the president and address, it's already starting to address it by the Students' Loan Board, which is going a long way in enabling students to access education. But let us have a summit where the governors, who are the heads of the sub-regional levels, will also be there with their own commissioners and policymakers, so that we can formulate a coherent national strategy And then we can, as Senate President Emeritus said, back it up with appropriate legislation. Right now, there are states, unfortunately, in this country, unfortunately, where even with the monies available in UBEC, they can't pay their counterpart funds to access. This country has a framework for managing most of these things. But look at the UBEC funds. There are some states, incidentally, those are the states that are highly even implicated in the area of communal crisis and insecurity and banditry and so on. Because there's a clear link between investing in education and stability of our communities and our society and our country also. So, Mr. President, I think this is beyond education. It's beyond out-of-school children. You should take the lead and let the president be briefed and the state governors so that we can all sit down as a country and fashion out an educational system that will work for all of us. Thank you very much.
I do appreciate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm alone, I represent Yobe North. Mr. President, I want to make some comments on the recommendations. These comments are of general nature. I believe that the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria has no national policy on out-of-school children. Mr. President, the National Council on Education must have a clearly spelled out national policy on out-of-school children. We have 20 million out-of-school children, and in fact, could be more. And this is a huge challenge to not only our educational sector, but our national security, Mr. President. So we should, when we consider the recommendations, we should urge the National Council on Education, where the Federal Ministry of Education, all the states, ministries of education, and the FCT are present to have a clearly defined national policy on out-of-school children. The second thing, Mr. President, in the recommendations is recommendation 5, where that's on page 7, where our committee, and I must commend the committee for a very good job, is talking about the release of funds for dealing with this issue. I think based on what we should know better, we should appropriate. We should not leave this matter in the hands of the Federal Ministry of Education alone. Our committee on basic education particularly should engage. And then in the 2025 appropriation bill, something tangible, something meaningful and reasonable and significant should be made available. Lastly, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we are talking of feeding, the school feeding program. I, from my experience, and of course those who are in the 9th National Assembly, would tell you that that program was abused, grossly abused. Even when COVID kept everybody in their residences, expenditures were incurred on feeding people who were not in schools. That means that the program is prone to abuse and manipulation. So we need to look at how to make it foolproof if we must continue with the school feeding program. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Comment in respect to this report. First of all, let me commend the committee led by Senator Lawan Adrabu Usman for a wonderful job. They did a good work in putting together this report. I commend them for doing so. And I feel compelled to make my comment in respect to this report because the issue is really grave. It's a serious problem that if we leave it unattended to, it's a kind of time bomb And once the bomb explodes, it's going to consume us, particularly the northern part of this country, because the number of children that roam our streets without going to schools is really something that needs our attention. It's a serious problem, serious problem. And it's a problem that is beyond, the solution is beyond the federal government alone or any type of government. It should have an all-inclusive attention. State governments, local government, federal government, traditional rulers, religious leaders, and even parents, everyone, because everyone has a role to play. And I feel happy that the committee concluded by saying addressing the issue of out-of-school children in Nigeria demands concerted joint efforts of government at all levels, national, state, and local, traditional rural parents, development partners, and so on and so forth. Because federal government can't do it alone. State government cannot do it alone. Everyone has to come together. Everybody should come together. And when you go to the lowest level, the parents, there must be reorientation of those who feel that schools or education is not important. Let them understand. And the parents also, they should be reoriented, they should have a reorientation in respect to knowing the fact that being parents, they have that duty on them to make sure that they train their children in the proper manner, prescribe the two religions, the two prominent religions we have in this country, both Islam and Christianity. It really, gives that responsibility onto the parents to make sure that they take care of their children. So allowing kids to be roaming the streets in the first place is not something that is accepted by Islam. Without, giving them the proper care, it's not something that is accepted by Christianity. That has to be said loud and clear. The reorientation has to commence immediately so that parents will know that they need to do that. Then, of course, there should be an arrangement as clearly spelled out by Senator Dixon and Senator Solomon for the whole stakeholders to sit down and find out a solution to this problem.
30 seconds.
So I say so, Mr. President.
I thank you for adhering.
Mr. President, let me start by going down the memory lane. As far back as the year 2000, the Universal Basic Education was launched by President Olusegun Obasanjo in Sokoto. Why Sokoto? Sokoto happens to be one of the most educationally disadvantaged states. And of course, the surrounding states like my own Ikebi, Zamfara, down to Katsina, and what have you. And the whole idea is to get everybody going to school, right from the age of 5 up to 15. That's why we said universal basic education, primary, and also junior secondary school. And huge sums of money are budgeted every year. And counterpart funds were required by the state government. And unfortunately, Mr. President, in our constitution, like it's been said by other contributors, education is on the concurrent legislative list, where state and federal government can legislate. But we know that primary education, if you look at the constitution properly, rests with the local government councils. And we know what's happening to the local government council today. Their money is not being given to them. We debated here severally. Even on the 9th Senate, there was even a legislation we made that money should be released directly to the councils. Unfortunately, it didn't see the light of the day. So there is very little the local government council can do. Now, everything rests with the state government. Some of them are not even interested in accessing the fund from the UBEC. Like Adola said, billions are now waiting. And Mr. President, we should make it very clear, states that are not interested in accessing this money should be given to other states that are interested. We can't allow the money to be lying waste. Some states have even passed legislation making it compulsory for every child to be in school. But unfortunately, they lack, the ability to enforce the legislation. And once there is no enforcement, nothing happens. And I agree with all those that said that out-of-school children is like an elephant in the room. It is the biggest security risk we have in the country. To be honest, I want to state very clear that Nigeria is the only country in the world where we have over 20 million out-of-school children. Over 20 million. This has been said by the United Nations, and it has been said by National Bureau of Statistics. It has been confirmed by Federal Ministry of Education. But what have we done to really address the problem? So I agree that there should be a national conference on this. Let us call the governors, let us call our legislators, let us call our businessmen and sit under one roof and discuss this issue. It is so serious that we have to tackle it with all seriousness, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Senator Bank.
Ago, Bill Clinton, former president of America, had to come to Nigeria. What was he coming to do? He was concerned about the plight of out-of-school children. He particularly said, we are sitting on time bomb. Today we are already seeing the time bomb addressing these issues. Some people will say it is from federal, some people will say from the state. Coming as a former governor, I think it is from the states. I say this because of out of experience, sir. Federal government have done everything, a lot. They have done a lot. When we attempted Al-Majiri school, taking back children, compulsorily forcing them to go to school, it ended with a religious dimension, and it died down. They are back to Al-Majiri streets. They introduced agile program, especially for the female ones. Only very few states, even with the World Bank funds, are bringing counterpart funds. I take a dimension from the last one that we did. Mr. President, you have done your best, even commenting every time about actions on local government funds. Today, we are still seeing a different thing, like they mentioned. At one time, when we were governors, we recommended to the president, we say you must take some compulsion. You must do some compulsory measures. What was the time when he attempted? President Buhari attempted one. When parish funds came, parish, what do they call it? Parish funds came. He made it a priority that all those that have not accessed the UBEC funds in respect to education, in your state, it was, first of all, a priority. They will remove it and access compulsorily for you to go and address those issues. Then the remaining balance, they will tell you, come and collect. Today, sir, we have a lot of certain things, even without parish club. We have subsidy palliatives. We have so much funds going to the states, but they are not addressing the issue of education. Mr. President should also take bold steps to take a decision. Any palliative that is going to a state, and that state has challenges of educational funding, especially accessing SUBE funds, what they will do is to say, okay, first priority, we are taking this to access your SUBE fund. Go and address the issue of out-of-school children. Otherwise, we'll continue to do the same thing. We'll introduce so many measures and it will go in vain. We are looking forward to one day that this country will agree with Mr. President that direct funding will go to local governments so that they will address this matter. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And this is Senator Sani Musa.